Buddy, it's Mr. Second Password. Today we're going to cover what's happened to me right now as I'm selling a property in Guayaquil, Ecuador, and how much in taxes I have to pay as well as the buyer to kind of give you an idea. And I found this really great free uh, online tool that I'll share in the description below. I'll leave the link so that you can check it out yourself. Maybe you have a property you're thinking about selling, and based on how long you've held it and how much you bought it for versus how much you're selling it for, it'll give you an idea how much you have to pay in Ecuador as the seller, right, just to unload and sell off that property. And how much, you'll also know how much the buyer has to pay too in property taxes when they buy it, in case you're interested in that as well. So, anyway, I got a real example here. I was just told by the bank because the buyer, as I covered last video, the buyer of my property applied and got qualified for a bank loan, a partial bank loan to buy the property. So the bank called me up and said, "Hey, you need to go pay now $510 in capital gains uh, costs." And so, how would I know that that figure is actually correct, right? Because someone they could just tell me anything. And when you go to the municipal to pay this amount or wherever they tell you need to go, they'll take your money, right? If you pay 5,000 when you should only pay 500, the municipal will still take that money and just give you a receipt. Is what I've seen in Ecuador. So you should know exactly, in Ecuador, how much do you need to pay, how much in capital gains tax, right now in 2021, because it and has changed over the last several years since I've been in Ecuador. So anyway, the current amount now is 10% of the difference shown on the title or escrituras from when you bought the property to when you sold the property. That difference, 10%, with a 5% deduction or discounted back for each year that you held on to the property. So in theory, if you held on to the property for 20 years in Ecuador, you wouldn't have to pay any more capital gains tax, right? And that's kind of what they're hoping for, that people don't flip properties, I guess, or they're going to have to pay a tax, right? So, um, and very important, it catches a lot of gringos, and it's probably caught me if I think about it. But what a lot of Ecuadorian sellers will do, especially when they have, kind of a what they think to be a dumb gringo on the hook for buying a property, they will say, "Hey, we're gonna put on the deed, because you kind of can in Ecuador, the property value way low, right? And that way, both of us," they'll say, "can pay a lot less in taxes." And you have to decide, like looking at this calculator I'm going to show you today, if that works for you or not. If you're going to hang on to the property for a long time, then it might work out for you, but definitely for quick flips, probably not. Because, like, for example, you'll buy $100,000 house on the beach here in Ecuador, but the seller will say, "Hey, let's just put it for 20, let's put it on the deed as a sale of $20,000, right?" And that way, the seller gets off the hook of paying the capital gains tax, and they push it on you. So, say most of us buy property here thinking we're going to hold to it forever, but then after 3 or 4 years, something happens. We decide to sell it, which is exactly kind of what happened to me with this property in Guayaquil. And then in 3 or 4 years from now, say you sell that $100,000 house for 120. Well, now if you registered the deed when you bought it for 20 grand, that seller got off the hook, and now that huge capital gain just fell on you, right? So you're going to have to pay 10% of the difference between 20,000, what you said you bought it for on the deed, and 120, the new purchase price, right? That's a huge $100,000 difference, and they're gonna nick you for 10 grand minus, for the 3 years, 5% of that 10 grand, minus 5% for each year that you've held it. So you're still looking at maybe close to $9,000 capital gain tax that really most of it didn't correspond to you as the owner during the time you owned it. So definitely something to think about before you let the seller off the hook like that. Obviously, it makes a big difference when you're buying or selling huge or real expensive properties in Ecuador, but it's definitely something to think about, and look right at the deed and see what kind of price sales price they put on it before you bought it, or you could get hit with a nasty capital gain tax when you sell it. So, and it's something that there's no way around it. The seller has to pay it. When it's a cash sale, the process is a little different. I had no one explain this to me. I've just kind of learned this on the go and doing it. Um, Usually, the capital gains tax that the seller has to pay, the buyer will deduct that from the final amount that they pay to you when you close the sale. Right. In this case, it's the bank. So the bank told me, no, in order for us to disperse to you the final payment, I've already signed the close, as I covered in my last video. They said, no, you have to go pay this amount. In my case, $510. I need to go pay that so they can continue to register the deed in the new person's name and then send out my final payment, supposedly. Right. So that's kind of how the process differs if you sell to someone with financing or not. So anyway, let's take a look at a real example. And I'm selling a property in Guayaquil, $82,000. I'm just plugging it in here in this link, and I'm selling all of it, so 100% of it, and that's the estimated valuation of it, 82,000, I guess. And the value that I bought it for 3 years ago was 76,000. So not my best investment for sure. We'll cover that in another video up and coming here. But anyway, that's the situation right now. And when I bought it was December 2017. So, and then I just hit calculate down here. Calcular, and all these numbers spit out, pretty nice. And there it is, the value that I need to pay in utilidad, or the valor agregado, they say, or the tax, capital gains tax, we say in English, is exactly $510. So I need to go pay that amount. That amount was correct. I've just verified it, right? And the value that the buyer is going to have to pay based on the sales price, right, is the alcabala. That's kind of the transfer tax that you pay here to the municipal when you buy a property. It's normally like 1%, which in this case, there it is, $820 that the buyer is going to have to pay, along with all the notary fees. Usually the buyer takes care of that in Ecuador. So I've just confirmed that the capital gains amount that they told me I have to pay is the amount I actually have to pay, which is something you can now do if you ever sell a property in Ecuador. You don't have to just take someone's word for it.